Okay, the first question is, why theory is important in the application of the study of motor skills, motor control, and learning? Theories are very important to these three because theories accounts a significant large class of observations and definite predictions about the results of the future observations in the human movements. So in other words, theories help those three in observing each aspect of it, help to assess the difference between the three, and it will boost the curiosity towards the study of it. So after having the observation, the study can be predict, and being an observable time by time, the knowledge that we have might produce predictions concerning how movements are acquired and controlled. So it is true that theories are like ways of looking at art. It provides many thoughts, explanations about things, movements, and it connects individual elements into unified structure. So, same as in the case of human movements, theories allow us to see the different meaningful perspective of the motor skills, control, and learning. These are the two theories that explain motor control and learning. So the first theory is the cognitive based theory, and the second is the dynamical system theory. So these two theory is very important to us to understand because it explains fairly and have diverse set of observations concerned to the human movement, and both theories prove something successfully in predicting new observation that expand our understanding to the factors responsible for human movement, and control and learning. So now we'll proceed to the number 2 question. Number 2 question is, explain how far you understand information processing model. You can state example or demonstrate your example. So, how far I understand this processing model? So, information processing model state that a human brain cells is like a computer's where it's actively process information received, follows a program to generate an output, shape it, record it, and store it through our senses. So, the processing model is, kumbaga, it compares to our brain cells. It compares to the function of our brain cells. Kung paano ba nagge-generate ng information yung computers. Kumbaga, meron ding similarities yung generating nila ng information sa ating brain cells. So, for example, yung ano ko dito, yung kumbaga na state ko na through our senses. So, makaka-generate tayo ng information through our senses. So, for example, sa soccer field, you see, kumbaga nakita mo yung isang grupo na nag-generate na kanilang strategies. Kumbaga nakita mo kung paano nila pina-perform yung strategies nila, and narinig mo din yung some information and some strategies na kumbaga yung mga information ng strategies na gagawin nila. So through that, makaka-generate ka talaga ng new knowledge and new information na ganito pala yung ginagawa nilang strategies in order na manalo or mag-goal nila yung ball. So this model serves as a framework and a cycle for describing the various cognitive processes involved in motor program operation. And it has 3 distinct stages that help us to make this model more understandable. So the 3 distinct stages is the perceptual stage, decision making, and the programming stage of cognitive processes that underlie the events responsible for the production of the motor skills. So, for the perceptual stage, it is the process of selecting and organizing and interpreting the selective information to bring the individual's awareness so that it can acted upon. So, while the decision-making stage is the perceptual stage is compared to the past information or past experience in order to determine the appropriate action. And lastly, is the programming stage, where the information entails creating the appropriate motor program to carry out the action determined in the decision-making stage. So, I will explain these 3 stages through my example. So, my example is, in the field of soccer, my teammates having a plans on how to goal the ball. And that's way, I formulate some informations on how to get the ball away from the opponent. And generate process on how to cooperate well with my teammates. So, sa perceptual stage ko, kumbaga, nagge-generate ako doon ng information kung paano ko, kumbaga, if mapunta ba sa akin yung bola, paano ko ba ma-generate, kumbaga, I'm generating an information kung paano ko siya kumbaga, maipasa ko ba sa teammates ko, or kung paano ko maigugol yung bola sa goal post. So, in the decision making naman is that dito na sa decision making mapapasok yung, kumbaga, nasa akin na yung bola. So, I decide, kumbaga, magdi-decide ako dito na, kunwari, if nasa akin na yung bola, ipapasa ko ba sa teammates ko na alam kong map-goal niya yung bola, or gagawin ko yung part ko na kumbaga, na nasa akin yung bola, so gagawin ko yung part ko, kumbaga, mag-take ako ng risk sa part na yun, na kumbaga, magiging selfish ako na I know kakayanin ko to kasi I did it before na nag-goal ko yung bola. So, kumbaga, I'm having a decision making kung gagawin ko ba yung past experience ko dito, kumbaga, i-apply ko ba yung past experience ko, kung same pa ba yung, kumbaga, yung outcome ng past experience ko dito na mag-goal ko yung ball, or kung ibibigay ko ba yung ball doon sa trusted teammates ko na alam kong mag-goal niya yung ball doon sa goal post. So, now for the output of my decision making, I decide that I pass the ball to my teammates, which is near from the goal post. So, kumbaga, I decide na ibigay ko na lang gipass ko yung bola doon sa teammates ko na malapit din siya doon sa goal post. And she goal it because she has the opportunity to goal it easily, and she is in the proper position, and luckily she's near with the goal post. So yung outcome ng decision making ko is, kumbaga merong hesitation, pero yung hesitation na yun is, kumbaga, ko pa rin gipurso kasi parang na-feel ko, kumbaga, I sense na mag-goal niya yung bola, kasi meron din siyang opportunity na mag-goal, kasi nandoon siya malapit sa goal post, at kumbaga, meron siyang tamang proper position and posture na mag-goal niya yung bola. So, for my feedback naman, the feedback for me as a performer is not really that easy to decide on what to do, especially I am not in the good posture, and I am not in the proper position to pass the ball easily because there are many opponents na nagbablock ng way ko. So, kumbaga, yung feedback ko sa sarili ko doon sa part na nag-decision ako is, kumbaga, meron ding hesitation sa akin na that's why na nag-make ako ng decision, kasi alam kong merong nagbablock sa akin ng opponents at hindi madali na ipasa agad yung bola doon sa aking teammates. So, we will proceed to the number 3 question. So, the question number 3 is, give one example or skill you can explain or demonstrate of a closed-loop system of information processing in relation to its definition. Assess the relative strengths and weaknesses of a closed-loop system to your given example. So, first, I will briefly explain what is closed-loop. So, closed-loop system is a type of control system in which the system output is monitored and feedback into the system as an input. So, the example of this closed-loop system is walking in a straight line. So, walking in a straight line that draw on the ground. In this example, If you keep your eyes open, you will receive a feedback where you are stepping the line correctly and without any missteps as you walk. So, yung dito sa example na to, kumbaga, maglalakad ka sa isang straight line na kumbaga, nakadraw sa ground. So, ano talaga, obvious naman na, kumbaga, makorek natin yung steps natin when our eyes is open. Kumbaga, maano natin ba, ma-generate natin yung yung mali nating ginagawa. Kumbaga, makikita natin na ay hindi pala straight yung body posture ko sa pag walk doon sa straight line. So, kumbaga mako-correct natin yung ating kumbaga ating mali doon. But sa example na to, if you walk in that straight line na naka-close yung eyes mo, so the only thing that you have to go on is your own perception of how straight you are walking, and you will most likely walk off the line. You will able to detect some error out of it because you are not sure about your control in walking to that line. So, yun doon. Kumbaga, magkaiba talaga na nag-walk ka sa straight line na naka-open yung mata mo at naka-close. So, doon sa close is, kumbaga, mafe-feel mo talaga, kumbaga, masisense mo na parang may mali, yung ganun. Parang makakadetect ka ng some errors na feel, na kumbaga, ay, feel ko hindi na to straight yung pag-walk ko kasi hindi ko makikita yung position na nasan ako ngayon while walking on that straight line. And the relative strength of walking in a straight line is that this skill is unpracticed skills where we can control and make it appropriate when our eyes is open. So, yun doon na yung point ko na kumbaga na it is yung walking in the straight line na naka-open yung mata natin is an unpracticed skills, which is na alam natin yung gagawin natin. But it allows our movements to be corrected and to do it properly. Yun doon na ma-allow talaga natin na ma-correct yung ating proper movements. Ma-allow natin yung improper movements natin na maging proper movements. And the weaknesses of this example is that when we try to walk in straight line while our eyes is closed, it will proceed on a trial and error basis and accompanied by many errors, which we need to monitor our feedback, and we must use much of our consciousness and attentional resources in maintaining the quality of these new movements. So ito yung kumbaga yung mga weaknesses ng mga errors natin while closing our eyes in walking on the straight line. Na kumbaga pa talaga tayo need natin ng trial and error, or need natin ng training or practice to do this kind of movement na maging like doon sa movement na while our eyes is open. Kumbaga, magiging the same yung movement natin sa pag-walk doon sa straight line, doon sa pag-open, while our eyes is open. If i-practice din natin yung movement natin na naka-close yung mata natin, na same doon sa paggawa natin ng movement, ng proper movement doon sa pag-open ng eyes natin. Kumbaga, we need to practice this kind of movement para yung outcomes niya is mag-the same doon sa other sa previous na movement. The question. So now we will proceed to the question number 4. So the question number 4 is, give one example or skill you can explain or demonstrate of an open loop system of information processing in relation to its definition. Assess the relative strengths and weaknesses of an open loop system to your given example. So the example that I will give is that about dart. So when throwing a dart, once you have begun throwing at the dart, there is nothing you can do to adjust your level of throwing because the movement is too fast. There is no conscious thought involved. So, sa ano kasi, sa open loop system, kumbaga dito na include yung rapid movements and kumbaga hindi na i-involve dito yung conscious thought natin. Kumbaga once we throw the dart, kung ano yung outcome doon, yun na talaga. Kumbaga hindi natin maibabalik yung outcome na ginawa natin doon. Kasi as my experience kasi din way back in my high school, na as I remember din na na when we playing dart, kumbaga wala talaga kaming, kumbaga hindi namin yung conscious thought natin. Kumbaga kung yung talaga, yung kamay mo na feel mo na nakasight na talaga doon sa target, yun na yung gagawin mo, yun na yung isa-sight mo. Parang kumbaga ididiretso mong throw yung dart kasi alam mong yung kamay mo is nakastraight na doon sa target, pero hindi. So yun yung mali, yung kumbaga hindi ko nagamit yung conscious thought ko kasi kasi I know that time na pag straight yung kamay mo doon sa may target, masa-target mo talaga yung yung dart doon, pero hindi pala. So that yung dito na sinabi na hindi mo na ma-adjust yung level of throwing mo, kung ano na yung outcome doon, yun na talaga yun. So this example doesn't produce any feedback. So yun yung sinabi ko, hindi na kumbaga hindi na nagfi-feedback yung dito, yung hindi na nagproduce ng feedback, and it can't be altered if an unpredictable change arise. So the relative strengths of this example is that throwing a dart are pre-structured once initiated and carried out without the needs for further major modification of the movements. And throwing a darts is producing a quick movements, and it is not an attention demanding. So yun yung yung kumaga yung strength ng ng example ko. So for the weaknesses niya naman is that this skill is not effective if your knowledge in playing darts are too low or not well learned, and this skill is not effective in changing environment. So now we will proceed to the question number 5, the last question. So explain how far you understand movement constraints in dynamical system theory. As much as possible, please give example. You can explain or much better demonstrate your example. So how far I understand movement constraints in dynamical system theory. Movement constraints in dynamical system theory is that systems are always constrained to operate within specific boundaries. The movement options of the performer's ability to move are limited due to a variety of constraints or restrictions. So, my understanding about this is, kumbaga, when a performer is performing, there is always a constraint or restriction talaga. Kumbaga, may limit yung actions namin. May limit yung aming movement while playing this one, while dancing this, or while exercising a specific movement. Kumbaga, meron talagang merong restriction or limitation yung aming movements. So, this movement constraints has 3 categories that Newell 1986 identified. So, these 3 constraints are the first is the organism or the performer, second, the environmental constraints, and third is the task constraints. So, first, we will discuss the organism or the performer. So, the organism or the performer are the character that relate to the performer's physical and functional aspects. It includes some constraints like the height, strength, weight, body shape, and motivation. This is some constraints na nagkukonsist doon sa organism or the performer. So, my example here is that when a soccer player 1, height, kumbaga nagha-height siya ng 5'5", and his opponent, yung kalaban niya is nag-height ng 6'1". So, the constraints between them is their height difference, which the opponent can block him from receiving the ball. So, kumbaga, yun yung kumbaga yung restrictions na doon na makita yung limitations ng player number 1. Meron talaga siyang, kumbaga, ililimit niya yung kanyang movements kasi he knows or she knows na yung opponent niya is mas matangkad pa sa kanya, which is siya na kumbaga maiisip niya doon na it will kumbaga merong part na mabablock siya ng kanyang opponent kasi mas matangkad sa kanya at mas malaki, yung ganun. So next is the environmental constraint. We will proceed to environmental constraints, which can be a physical or socio-cultural that can affect on the performance and decision-making process of the performer. Some constraints of environmental are the weather, the surface, materials, and obstacle. So, my example here is that the factors that may happen in the volleyball game, which is the environmental constraint, is the net height, where some of players is not used to the height of the net, and it may lead to complications where some of the player will be uncomfortable to the new environment that they have, and it may affect their performance as a group. So in this sa may example ko na to is that kumbaga yung yung constraints na dito is the environmental, yung halimbawa dito sa lugar namin naglalaro kami ng volleyball. So kumbaga yung yung standard na yung standard na net height yung ginagamit namin. So yun na yung environmental namin, yung nakasanayan namin na laruin. Very comfortable kami doon. But when we compete sa other place, so kumbaga yung net height na nila is standardized na. Kumbaga yung na talaga yung kumbaga anong tawag dyan, yung yung tamang height na, which is yung mataas na masyado. So yung constraints doon is the net height, yung kumbaga ililimit din namin yung aming performance sa sa net height, kasi baka meron ding part doon na hindi namin mabablock yung bola because of the net height na kumbaga uncomfortable kami doon kasi iba yung nakasanayan namin sa dito ngayon sa kinocompete namin na kumbaga merong some restrictions na baka hindi namin ma-block or yung bola kasi sa sobrang sa standardized ng net, yung ng height ng net. So for the last category is the task constraints. So the task constraints is the human movement outcomes for various tasks to perform. It also includes some factors such as the rules of the game, equipment use, the area, the goals, and a number of the players. So, dito, yung task constraint is yung, dito yung mga, mga constraints niya is yung the rules of the game, the equipment na ginagamit sa game, yung goals ng game, yung area, and yung number ng players. So, the example for this is the category is that when playing a basketball, the rules govern the number of steps taken by a player before shooting the ball. So, kumbaga, yung limitation ng player dito, ginagovern niya yung movement ng player kasi ito yung tamang steps na gagawin dapat nila before shooting. Kumbaga, magti-take muna sila ng number of steps before shooting kasi pag hindi nila nagawa yun, kumbaga, parang merong mga foul na mangyayari kung hindi nila isusunod yung rules of the game. So that's all.